Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Charles Lipson, Professor Emeritus at the University of Chicago. Charles, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure to be with you, Brittany.
An interesting conversation today. Hunter Biden's lawyer said that he will testify before Congress, but on the condition that the hearing is public. What do you make of this?
Well, you remember that great scene in The Godfather where there's a horse head in the bed? And
Perhaps the most
how can you
iconic
forget it?
scene in cinematic history, yes.
And do you remember what The Godfather said about why he was going to get the Frank Sinatra character into the movie? He said, "I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse." And what Abby Lowell is doing, the hardball lawyer for Hunter Biden, is the exact opposite. He's making him an offer they can only refuse. It's designed to make Hunter look like he wants to testify, when in fact I think it's the last thing in the world he wants to do.
So, do you think that this offer is a good thing for Hunter Biden?
Well, I think that it was a smart thing for him to do, but the let's talk about what would really happen in a normal process. So what this committee is doing is the same as all other committees. It's the same as what Adam Schiff did with his committee and so forth when they were investigating Trump. They hold behind the scenes hearings. And why do they do? And then they determine if there are things. They make two determinations. One is, should they release the transcript of that? And sometimes they don't want to release it for political reasons that might make them look bad. But the main reason they don't want to release it is they don't want other witnesses to know what one witness has said, so that they can get their stories together. But if you watch most of these public hearings, what they're kind of show trials. They're divided into 5-minute segments in which each congressperson or senator or whatever ask a few questions. The next person comes from the other party, asks different kinds of questions. There's no continuity. When you have the behind the scenes thing, it's almost always given over to professional investigative attorneys. And Hunter Biden would have his own attorney, Abby Lowell. The Democrats would have their attorney, the Democrats on the committee, and then the Republicans would. And the Democrats and the Republican attorney would ask questions, maybe for 30 minutes, half an hour, and then switch over to the other one. But you would have more than enough time, and you wouldn't be trying to get the story essentially out to the public. So if what they're offering Hunter Biden is a deal that is identical to the deal that everybody else who's testified, and Hunter doesn't want to take it. What I would say is, we're willing to compromise with you. If I were the Comer and the Republicans, I would say we're willing to compromise with you. We're willing, several after, just before you publicly testify, we're willing to release what you've said behind closed doors to the public. So that's all out there, and we'll do that, let's call it 1 week before an agreed public testimony. But I think Hunter would have problems with a public testimony because he's facing criminal charges potentially in California over taxes and gun charges. It's absolutely ludicrous that they haven't charged him as being a foreign agent, a FARA violation, because he was representing foreign governments. So he will not want to say anything that would jeopardize cases that are still being heard by a grand jury. So he would have to take the Fifth Amendment. And boy, that's a bad look for Hunter Biden. But it's an even worse look for the president, and that's who really matters here.
And I want to talk about how this impacts President Biden in a moment, but back to Hunter. I mean, over the past few years, Hunter Biden really has been a third rail. Everyone's called him either it's been a conspiracy theory of the far right to others on the right saying, hey, no, he's a grifter or a criminal or worse. And this is in part what Hunter Biden's lawyer wrote. A public proceeding would prevent selective leaks, manipulated transcripts, doctored exhibits, or one-sided press statements. You touched on this earlier, but how true do you think that is? Do you think he has a point in that?
Well, sure, because I mean, Adam Schiff, that was his modus operandi when they were trying to investigate Trump. He leaked, and it was a scandal. And I didn't hear Abby Lowell say anything about it then, but it's a problem. He's defending his client. He's going to make. I don't know if you've heard the old joke of the lawyer who was bit by who had a dog and he bit somebody, and he said his defense was, "You weren't bitten." Well, I was. Well, the bite wasn't very bad. Well, yeah, it was. Well, you didn't have to go to the hospital. Well, yes, I did. And it goes on, and then the lawyer finally says, "I don't have a dog," when he did. So you use every defense you can, and that's exactly what Abby Lowell is doing. That's what a good lawyer does. The interesting thing here to me, Brittany, is that Abby Lowell is a smash mouth attorney. He comes right after you with as hard as he can go. There's no subtlety, right? He's very smart, don't get me wrong. I mean, he's a very smart, capable attorney, but you hire him because you want the meanest SOB in the room, kind of, which is what Roy Cohn said, Joe McCarthy's lawyer once said about why people should hire him. He said, when anybody in New York thinks I want the meanest SOB in New York City to be my lawyer, I want them to think that's Roy Cohn. And I think when people hire Abby Lowell, that's the kind of defense they want. But that's not necessarily the kind of defense the White House wants. They would like to keep all this very low profile, and Abby Lowell is going very high profile.
I do want to talk about the Republican reaction a bit to this. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik said this, quote, in an open public hearing, "You see the Democrats turn this into a charade." And Congressman James Comer rejected this proposal that the public hearing should replace Hunter Biden's private deposition. But he said this, quote, he put this on X. "We, of course, would welcome Hunter Biden to testify at a public hearing. However, this doesn't mean the president's son now gets to defy a lawful subpoena directing him to appear for a deposition." Do you think, A, that their response, what do you think of their responses, A, and B, does it sound like they are somewhat, I saw a headline that said, is the GOP chickening out? Do you think that's what this sounds like?
Well, that's why Abby Lowell did it. I don't think that's what the GOP is doing. I think there's also a hidden motive here. Think about what happens if Hunter refuses to obey a lawful subpoena. The committee can't jail him or something like that. What normally happens is you go to the Justice Department, the Biden administration Justice Department, and you say, "Would you enforce our subpoena?" And they say, "We'll get back to you in a couple of years." They don't say, "No, we won't do it." They just don't do anything for a long time. And at that point, the committee or the House itself, the whole House, has to go to a federal court in a very Democratic district of D.C. and say, "Will you enforce this?" And they do have the leverage that is part of a legitimate it has a legitimate legislative purpose, and that purpose is an impeachment investigation. That's one of the reasons they launched it. And the courts may say, yes, you have to do it. But this takes a long time. And so this is, in a way, trying to run out the clock. And that's, again, a smart strategy by Abby Lowell, but it's against the public interest. In the end, the public interest is in understanding what the Biden family was doing, but critically, what Joe Biden knew, whether Joe Biden aided, knowingly aided in the process, and if Joe Biden personally benefited. Now, we don't know the answer definitively to any of those. You may have your guess, and I have my guess, and we have some evidence, and I think we have pretty good evidence that Joe Biden knew. I think we have medium evidence that he may have aided in various ways, and we certainly have evidence that senior law enforcement officials at the DOJ and at the IRS tried to do everything they possibly could, and even said so, to block an investigation that would touch on Joe Biden. But we have almost nothing at this point that he benefited. And in my opinion, Brittany, that's insufficient to get an impeachment vote, and would be insufficient if I were voting, even if the Republicans had a large majority, and right now they don't.
Charles, I mean, to your point, we've been talking about this since this summer. This investigation has been going on before that, and there is no definitive smoking gun that definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, connects President Biden to these payments that he knew, that he benefited, to your point. So when will we see that evidence? Because this has now been going on for months.
It's not clear if they ultimately can find it. I think that I gave you three links. One is, did he know? And I think they can make a number of points that he knew, because he met so many times with Hunter Biden's business associates, and the only thing Hunter had to sell was access, or as his attorney has now at least acknowledged, the illusion of access, whatever that means. And then, did he aid? Well, what he aided in was, if the Republicans are to be believed, is, I come to you, you're a government official, I need some assistance. And I say, our board member, Hunter Biden, is completely on board with this, and why don't we have his father call him? He wouldn't call you directly and say, do this, but it would show that this is a family enterprise. And the fact that, I mean, how many times have your parents been asked to call into a business meeting of yours, Brittany? It's never happened to me. And it happened to Hunter dozens of times, because Hunter was seeking that call to show the oligarchs from some oil-rich, corrupt country that he was trying to get money out of, that he was well connected with his father, then at the time vice president, and later running for president. But direct benefits are harder to prove. But it's also the case, and this may be why you can't prove it at all. I mean, there may be a little money that went into improving his house or doing things like that, but that Hunter was sharing with him. But the closer I would get to 80, and certainly the closer I would get to 90, the less money I would want for myself, and the more I would want to go directly to my heirs. Wouldn't you? I mean, so the fact that the money is going to Hunter, and then we have Hunter's previous statement in an email to his daughter that he had to share his profits with his father, that he had to give half of his income to his father. We don't know how that worked, but he's never had to testify about it.
This Hunter Biden shadow has been looming since the 2020 election. He might be testifying publicly. That's still yet to be seen. How does this all impact 2024? I know I ask you this every time, but now we're sitting here a new month. How is this impacting the presidential election?
Well, let me give you the answer that I may not be the same as the one I'll give you next month or the month after that, when we talk about the same question. Okay? Each party is doing what it did the last time. What did the Democrats do when they were investigating Trump? If they couldn't get him directly out of office, what they wanted to do was weaken his chances for re-election, right? That was the goal. And in fact, in many ways, it's the goal of all these prosecutions now. Some of the people would like to take all of his money away, some of it, but most, the big shots, the people who really understand what the game is about, what they want to do is weaken him uh, uh, among swing voters in swing states so that he won't be elected. And I believe that that's the political objective of people who are going after Joe Biden. To me, the crucial issue so far is that Democrats have backed Joe Biden with one crucial exception, and that's David Axelrod, who was a close advisor and friend of Barack Obama. I've known David for many years. I mean, we live close to each other in Chicago, and I've known David and have great respect for him. I know any insider information about this, but it's hard to believe for me that he would go after Joe Biden in such a direct way if that were really disagreeable, at the very least, to Barack Obama. But Barack Obama himself has not come out and said, I, I think we can do better in the next. That's what he would say. He wouldn't say, I don't think Joe should run. He says, probably, I think we should do better. We can get a younger candidate who has more support. If Barack Obama did that, it would be very difficult for Biden to keep going, and it would be an open invitation for people like Gavin Newsom to get into the race. But it's getting very late to do that, and the fact that Barack Obama has been unwilling to do that publicly, we don't know what's happened privately, may indicate that he just doesn't think that they can get Biden to avoid running. And if Biden runs, there's no way he can drop Kamala Harris, unpopular as she is. And normally, vice president doesn't matter much, but when you reach the age of Methuselah and you're really showing it, as Biden is, people begin to wonder if you'll make it through the entire 4 years, and they begin to look more closely at the vice presidential candidate, and that's a real weakness for Joe Biden. He can't drop her because he absolutely needs to keep black voters in line and voting in large numbers for him, and they might see dropping her as an insult. I should say it's also a problem for Donald Trump if he gets the nomination, because after what he did to Pence and others, it's unclear who would want to run with him, who could bring anything important to the table, remembering that Trump himself is among the oldest candidates ever to run for high office.
And right now, those two are neck and neck when it comes to the general election. We're still a year out, though, so there's a lot, and everything can change within the next year. But do you think the impeachment inquiry into President Biden / this Hunter Biden looming shadow is more of a sideshow, or do you think this will weaken him to the point where he really could lose based on this alone?
I don't think he could lose based on this alone. I think the main problem has been the economy. I must say they've kind of missed a bullet. Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, has so far done an extraordinary job. Everybody who's predicted a recession has been wrong. They've managed to raise interest rates, slow the inflation, which they'll have to stay on, keep their pedal on the brakes, to make sure it doesn't resume, but they did it without, so far, causing a recession. The second thing, I think, that is a potential black swan event, as they sometimes say, rare event that could have a big impact. We've had over 70 attacks on American troop installations and ships by proxies of Iran. That's pretty clear to me that it's had that whatever we're doing to deter Iran may have deterred them from giving the green light to Hezbollah in southern Lebanon from a large-scale attack, and so forth. But it hasn't risen to the level of a salient issue for the American voter. The first American who is killed, and it's just an accident that none have been, first American who's killed by an Iranian proxy is, plus the fact that we still have hostages in Gaza, is going to put a real focus on Joe Biden's foreign policy. And remember, it'll bring back memories of how poorly we exited Afghanistan. So that's another potential. So I would say the economy, Joe's age, this potential black swan event are all there. And I think that the main thing that the Republicans will be hoping to get out of the impeachment investigation, they can't win in the Senate. They probably can't run a full impeachment vote successfully in the House, because more than a dozen members of Republicans in the House were elected from districts that Joe Biden won in 2020, and those people will be very reluctant to vote out a president when we're within a year of a new election. They'll just say, and quite reasonably, this is something the voters should decide. So what the Republicans can do is create the perception, which I think is quite real, that the Biden family was engaged in a corrupt enterprise, and that it's centered around Joe Biden, who knew it and aided it. And then the question will be, who do you most want to vote against, Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
Well,
Nobody's
Charles,
voting for.
Well, we have to leave it there, but there are a lot of conversations to be had. Charles Lipson, thank you so much for joining me.